Well, welcome everyone to our morning service here on this last day of unleavened bread, wrapping up the Feast of Unleavened Bread, um, also called Passover. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us here on this, the 21st day of the first month, wrapping up the 21 days of sanctification, which is inclusive of this Feast of Unleavened Bread. We're in the 43rd year of the 40th Jubilee based on our reckoning. I'd like to start services by asking James if he would please open in prayer. If you'll please stand for the opening prayer, we'll turn the mic over to James. James, over to you.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yes, Father, we're spending the 21-day period of sanctification. Is talking about setting ourselves aside to follow the work that you wish to have done. And we were drafted into this originally. Well, you called us, made us aware more and more of your law. And after these many years of following your way completely, we find ourselves much better army to help you with this cause. An army that is really involved in how we think, what we do with what we think, how we have your enemy try to have all mankind accept the thoughts that he seems to put into their minds and have them act on it. So we, going back to the period of our conversion and our baptism, certainly learned a lot in those first years of how to discern truth and your words, your true words and your law and what you want from mankind. Doesn't turn up anywhere as being negotiable. It's a straight, open contract. He made the offer, and you can accept the offer on your calling. But the offer requires you to work for the rest of your life to strengthen your discernment in all areas of your life, require too many corrective judgments, but we can act on your words, your law, make it the best the best we can to all mankind, make it clear that whatever kind comes up with or is given to him by the Father law that tries to deceive everyone on the planet, we make as much of your words and your will and your way of life known to all that will listen to us, and those you may be calling. We know they have to be treated a bit differently than those that have been around for multiple decades, because this feature of this discernment is critical in how we all think, because we can be so easily misled. It seems astonishing to us after many decades that we find ourselves sometime realizing that, yes, we've been deceived as well, swallow statements whole, and now we need to spit them out and get them away from our lives. And this 21 days helps us. We've had 21 days to set maybe on writing in what relates to you and your thoughts, what needs to be corrected in how you act, and mostly how you think, and what's for any feature of any form of idolatry, whether it's the God of this world, mankind making themselves a God, a straight idolatry, and we should be very careful how we think, how we defend ourselves from it, make it known to anyone that'll listen. So we give you thanks for life, for the knowledge that you've given to us and the understanding, which seems to be strengthened every 21 days of the and controlled, in fact. So we control our thoughts and not some agent of this enemy of mankind. So we can keep ourselves properly aligned with you, your laws that will provide us with liberty alone. None other that's able to provide this kind of liberty. So we'll give you thanks for life, give you greatest appreciation for what you give to us and enable us to discern your will in our lives correctly. So we ask for all this, please, by the authority of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen to that. Thank you, James. Appreciate that opening prayer. If you'll please remain standing and take up your hymnals, open them up to page 21. On page 21, we'll sing our first hymn, which comes from Psalm 25, and it's titled, Our God is Good and Upright. That's page 21, Our God is Good and Upright, to open our song service on this last day of Unleavened Bread morning service today. Okay, let's see if you'll now turn a few pages over to page 25. That was a beautiful start to our song service today. We'll sing our second hymn, which comes from Psalm 32, titled, They Are Blessed Who Are Forgiven, after which we'll bring Wes to the mic to read in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 5. But first, we'll sing page 25, They Are Blessed Who Are Forgiven. Okay, if you'll now be seated, we'll turn the mic over to Wes to read in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 5. Wes, over to you.
You got me, Dave?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, chapter 5. It starts out and says, Naaman heals of leprosy. Now, Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now, bands from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel. And she served Naaman's wife. And she said to her mistress, if only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he could cure him of his leprosy. Now Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. By all means, go. The king of Aram replied, I'll send a letter to the king of Israel. So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothes. The letter that he took to the king of Israel read, with this letter I'm sending my servant Naaman to you so that you may cure him of his leprosy. And as soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robe and said, am I God? Can I kill or bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy? See how he is trying to pick a quarrel with me? When Elijah, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robe, he sent him this message. Why have you torn your robe? Have the men come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elijah's house. And Elijah sent a messenger to say to him, go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be clean. But Naaman went away angry and said, I thought he was good. Surely come out. Excuse me. Come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God. Wave his hands over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than any of the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went off in rage. And Naaman's servant went to him and said, my father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you, wash and be clean? So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him, and his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. Then Naaman and all his attendants went back to the man of God. He stood before him and said, now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel. Please accept now a gift from your servant. The prophet answered, as surely as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not accept a thing. And even though Naaman urged him, he refused. If you will not, said Naaman, please let me, your servant, be given as much earth as a pair of mules can carry. No, I don't understand that. Why would you want to give a guy earth to carry on mules? For your servant will never again make burnt offerings and sacrifice offerings to any other god but the Lord. But may the Lord forgive your servant for this one thing. When my master enters the temple of Rimmon to bow down, and he is leaning on my arm, and I bow down there also, when I bow down in the temple of Ramoth, Rimmon, not Ramoth, may the Lord forgive your servant for this. Go in peace, Elijah said. And after Naaman had traveled some distance, Gehazi, the servant of Elijah, the man of God, said to him, my master was too easy to Naaman, this Armenian, by not accepting from him what he brought. As surely as the Lord lives, I will run after him and get something from him. So Gehazi hurried after Naaman. When Naaman saw him running toward him, he got down from the chariot to meet him. Is everything all right? He asked. Everything's all right. Gehazi answered, but my master sent me to say, 2 young men from my company and my prophet have just come to me from the hill country of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 sets of clothing. By all means, take 2 talents. And Naaman, he urged Gehazi to accept them, and then tied up the 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 sets of clothes. He gave them to two of his servant, and they carried them ahead of Gehazi. And when Gehazi came to the hill, he took the things from their servant and put them away in the house. He sent the man away, and they left. Then he went in and stood before his master Elijah. Where have you been, Gehazi? Elijah asked. Your servant didn't go anywhere, Gehazi answered. But Elijah said to him, What was not my spirit with you when the man got down from his chariot to meet you? Is this the time to take money or to accept clothes, olive groves, vineyards, flocks, herds, manservants, maidservants? Naaman's leprosy will cling to you and to your descendants forever. Then Gehazi went from Elijah's presence, and he was leprous, as white as snow. Wow. What a number, huh? Back to you, Dave.
All right. Well, thank you, Wes. I don't know if anybody has anything they want to point out in these passages here. It looks like Francois has something he wants to say. Francois, the mic is yours.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, quite a penalty. I mean, to Gehazi, he was greedy and went for a little bit of money, and look what happened to him. I mean, he ended up with the disease that Naaman had. So quite a story indeed to meditate about it, and we have to be careful. I mean, and what we do, I think, because we never know. I mean, what we can bring upon ourselves. I mean, that's what I wanted to say.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing. A couple of things jumped out at me as Wes was reading through this. The first one is that, what Elisha asked Naaman to do was really quite simple. Just go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan. Now, he was offended, number one, that he didn't come out to greet him and didn't treat him with the proper respect that his lofty position deserved. And, and from his perspective, he was being asked to go wash himself in a mud hole. So sometimes the things that God requires of us are very simple. And we may think that it's somehow beneath us in our stature in this world or our status in this world. But we need to be careful of this arrogance, and that's what I see. I see he was a little bit arrogant. He expected a little more pomp and circumstance involved with his healing, and yet it was very simple, because healing is a very personal matter, and it's not something that you see on television, right? These televangelists, which leads me to my second point. Well, actually, my third point. My second point is that even the people of God can be surrounded by people that are deceptive. And, Gehazi was an apprentice or a servant of Elisha, and he was helping him, right? And so he did not contain the Spirit of God. He was greedy, and he lied, and he took money from Naaman for the healing he received. And much like these televangelists, right, this preaching for hire, or send me $1,000 and God's going to send you 10,000, that stuff is evil and should not be tolerated. And nobody should ever send money to one of these guys who live in multi-million-dollar mansions while people that can barely afford to pay rent are sending them 10% of their money. So this preaching for hire, trying to turn the truth of God into some profit venture, you see what happened. Gehazi inherited the leprosy of Naaman as a result of his actions. So don't think, that just because God is patient, that he will tolerate this forever. And there is going to be a judgment coming on all of the people that do these kinds of things. So that's my take on this story. So I don't know if anyone else has anything. Jerry, yes, go ahead.
Hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
What was interesting was that Elijah sent his messenger out, and I was thinking of what we're going through now with the quarantine, and the laws for a person with a leopard I think they were to be quarantined, and he was actually traveling, and I didn't know if the messenger was sent because he was supposed to be quarantined. It just kind of jumped out at me a little bit that in the law, it's if you're a leopard, you had to be sent away out of camp for a week and then show yourself to the priest.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It's hard to say, it's possible, but it's certainly, apropos for where we are right at this moment. Anybody else have anything they want to add? Yes, Francois.
I think Syria was not under God's law, so they probably didn't know about the quarantine laws. It's my take, and this is why he was not isolated. But obviously, I mean, Elisha told him what needed to be done, and he didn't come in his presence in the beginning. He just told them to go and wash himself in the river. So, but maybe that's why he was under quarantine, because he was not under the God's law because he was not from Israel. My opinion.
Yeah, he certainly, wasn't observant of the laws of Israel at that time. So perhaps he didn't follow any quarantine law, but that could be why Elisha didn't go out in the presence of the leprosy. He didn't want to make himself unclean, but I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and reread the legislation regarding quarantine and the leprosy and all of that. But, okay, well, if you will please, if no one has anything else they want to add, if you'll please stand and take up your hymnals, open them up to page 27. We'll sing our third hymn, which comes from Psalm 34, and it is titled, Turn Thou from Evil. That's page 27, Turn Thou from Evil, after which we'll bring Jerry to the mic to read in the book of Psalms chapter 23. But first, page 27, Turn Thou from Evil.
Upon the just of the eyes of God.
Okay, if you'll please be seated, we'll now turn the mic over to Jerry to read in the book of Psalm, chapter 23. Jerry, over to you.
I'll be reading out of the King James Version of the Bible in Psalm 23, the Psalm of David. Jehovah is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leadeth me to the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yeah, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. I will dwell in the house of Jehovah forever. That's a fitting psalm for today's time.
Yeah, it sure is. Does anybody have any comment they want to make on that one? One of the things that struck me is the statement, I will fear no evil. And that is something that, for me personally, if I can get a little bit personal, this coronavirus, I don't want to call it a pandemic, this hysteria that has occurred as a result of this coronavirus has instilled in me this fact that we don't need to be afraid. We have nothing to fear. God is on our side. And if we get the virus, God can protect us from the worst of its effects. He may let us get the virus so that we can build an immunity to it. The bottom line is our hope and our refuge is in God and God alone. And we should not fear any of this. Now, obviously, we have to be smart and use proper precaution. You know, we don't want to go out and intentionally get sick or get anyone else sick for that matter. You know, we're not to do anyone any harm, but we certainly have nothing to fear. And David said it over and over, you know, he didn't have fear because God gave us a spirit of boldness, not fear. So that's what jumped out at me. Yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
What's interesting on what you said, Dave, was before this really got pretty bad in our area, one of my workers was talking about the vaccine and how important it was that we all took the vaccine, but you could actually see that their hope was actually in the vaccine instead of in God, you know, instead of turning to God. And I think the first time Kenny was telling me this morning that President Trump actually called it a plague. So it was a different, you know, usually he calls it a pandemic or something, but it was the first time he mentioned that it actually is a plague. So I agree with you about the fear part. I could see the fear in just how many times different people were washing their hands, like so much that for things, I'm watching different things and I just can't believe actually how fearful everybody got. So that's all I wanted to add.
Oh yeah, the hysteria is really quite astounding to me. You know, I'm on this. There's a website called Nextdoor, and it's a neighborhood thing where people in particular neighborhoods sign up. You know, and there was some lady that got on the made a post on there talking about how terrible it was that people were walking around the walking paths and stuff and they weren't wearing masks, you know, and so she was so paranoid that she felt like we should all be wearing masks. And I just heard on the news this morning that the mayor of Beverly Hills has now made it illegal for you to go outside without a mask. And this is the kind of hysteria that these people have because they're led by a spirit of fear. And that spirit of fear comes from no one other than Satan. So, we have to really keep these things in perspective. And when you are confident in your relationship with God and you trust in Him, then from my perspective anyway, this is my opinion, it's certainly not medical advice, but my opinion, that you have nothing to fear. So
No, I agree. I agree with that. I'm trying to feel that in my household of no fear. Everyone just chill, turn to God. It's time. And I've got a tablet with Ten Commandments. Well, my little one, my 10-year-old, when she was younger, she remembers every time we went downstairs, we read it. So when I busted it out, she was like, "Oh, I remember those." I was like, "Oh, that's my bad. I haven't busted them out in a while, probably 3 years." And my little one is godless, really godless. And my wife is like, "Well, how are you acting?" I'm like, "Okay, all right." So I busted out those 10 commandments, and that's what we're practicing for this feast. This is the last day, and every day I want to read them. I want her to at least know what she needs to turn to and why I'm eating lamb at this time, why I don't like eggs and all that junk. So I'm just trying to make sure my 10-year-old definitely knows it and definitely prays. And the little one, I feel like she's got a demon in her. I don't even know how to describe it. She's horrible. But that's all. I tell them all they need to pray and don't be afraid, because fear is this devil. That's the devil. It all leads to the dark side, like we watch on Star Wars. That's all.
yeah, it's tough. Different children. I had 4 children, and every one of them have a very different personality. So none of them are the same. And there are certain personality traits, and Wes, you'll be up next. Certain personality traits that just people are born with, and it's quite interesting the differences that you get between different children. Wes, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Dave. I just wanted to mention that back in the Old Testament, Moses had a similar problem when the people were sinning and had done evil. God sent a snake. I shouldn't say a snake. Snakes to bite the people, and they died. And they come before Moses, and then Moses told them to make a sculpture of a snake, put it on a stick, and everybody that sees that they'll live. But the deal was that was made plain to me was the fact that the snakes were always there. They were always there. It's just that God just used them at that time. It wasn't something that God made up. So, in the same retrospect, there's plagues out there everywhere. And so, God decides who lives and who dies anyway.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Wes. And I was watching a presentation by a doctor who was talking about the immune system, and he was saying how we have hundreds of millions of viruses and bacteria in our bodies, and what he said that the coronavirus doesn't kill anybody. It's our messed up immune systems and its overreaction because of the fact that it's messed up, that it ends up attacking our own cells due to this thing called cell mimicry. And so because and he linked it back to, the gut biome and just overall health. He said the people that are dying have either degenerated immune systems or other morbidities. He said the vast majority of the people that get it barely have any symptoms or don't even know they had it. And because their immune systems are working properly. And that's why in populations where you have high pollution levels, poor diet, all of that, you see a higher morbidity rate. There was another doctor that is now linking it to glyphosate and the use of glyphosate and how that compromises your gut biome and your immune system. So there are a lot of factors involved in this whole coronavirus. And to your point, Wes, I think that God, you look at these plagues and all of that are supposed to come on the earth. I think a lot of those plagues are coming from what man does on this earth, and as a result of man's activities, and God is just letting it happen, right? He's not bringing it necessarily, but he's allowing it to happen because of the activities on the earth, like the fracking and the drilling into the geothermal drilling into volcanoes and stuff like that. It's destabilizing the Earth's crust and actually creating new fissures and fault lines in the plates themselves. And so there is so much activity that it's starting to destabilize things. So you're going to see increased earthquake activity, and you could potentially see increased volcanic activity as a result. So, a lot of the things that appear to be supernatural in nature, I think, are going to be the end result of man's misbehavior and mistreatment of the planet. But that's my opinion. So thank you for sharing that, Wes. If you'll please stand, if no one else has anything, if you'll please stand one more time and take up your hymnals and open them up to page 29. We'll sing our next hymn, which comes from Psalm 37, titled Rest in Yah, and that's on page 29, after which I'll be back with the main message, which is part one of a presentation called Sincerity and Truth. First, page 29, Rest in Yah. If you will please be seated, we'll now have our main message, which, as I said, is titled Sincerity and Truth. And let me pull up the presentation. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. We're live on Facebook, so welcome everyone who joins on Facebook. I don't know that we have a huge following yet, but we're going to keep going live on Facebook so that people can get a sense of what we're about, and so we can continue to at least attempt to fulfill the commission that Christ gave us to preach this gospel, this truth, this message to the world as a witness. So we'll keep doing it until a time comes when we can't. So there was a freelance writer named Charles Hughes Smith, and he wrote an essay titled "The Entire Status Quo is a Fraud." And he starts his essay by making some very poignant statements about the situation that we have, not only in the United States, but in the world abroad. You know, the state of affairs in the world today is very dire in terms of being a fraud. And here's what he had to say. And I think I included it in the presentation so you can read along. He says, "This cannot be said," actually, hold on. I did not turn on my video camera. Sorry about that. There we go. So he said, "This cannot be said politely. The entire status quo in America is a fraud. The financial system is a fraud. The political system is a fraud. National defense is a fraud. The healthcare system is a fraud. Higher education is a fraud. And the mainstream media, or the mainstream corporate media, is a fraud. Culture from high to pop is a fraud. Need I go on? We have come to accept fraud as standard operating procedure in America to the detriment of everything that was once worthy. Everyone in the system maximizes his or her personal gain by going along with the current trajectory, even if that trajectory is taking the nation off a cliff. Fraud as a way of life caters an extravagant banquet of consequences. While everyone maximizes their personal gain in whatever system of scam and fraud they inhabit, the nation rots from within. We have lost our way and lost the ability to tell the truth, face problems directly, abandon what has failed and what is unaffordable, and accept personal risk as the essential element of the successful adaptation. And we've, by and large, we have a society of victims. Everybody's a victim. I'm not held responsible for anything that I do because I'm a victim. I'm the way I am because this is what my parents made me. So it's my parents' fault. You offend me, so I need a safe space to run to because my ego and my emotions are so fragile that I can't tolerate the truth. Don't try to tell me that anything that I'm doing could have, bad consequences, because that is going to send me off into my safe space. And as he very eloquently points out, nothing in this modern world is real or sincere. Everything is a facade, and the truth, it's a facade of the truth that lies behind it. There's always an essence of truth somewhere. And little of what we see in the mainstream media can be really used at all as truth. It takes tremendous effort to really sift through the mounds of, I'll call it fake news, since that seems to be the buzzword going around today, to get to the truth of any subject. You know, everybody has a spin. And this spin, this web that is spun by Satan's human instruments, is multi-layered and very complex. In fact, in Revelation 12:9, it lays it out pretty plainly. It says in Revelation 12:9 that it says, "And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him." So Satan has a grip on the entire creation, or the cosmos as we call it, and he's the master deceiver and the father of lies. And the fact that he deceives the whole world should be a warning for us, to those that understand that the truth is going to be extremely difficult to ascertain from the voluminous fiction that's out there in the world. And nothing is what it seems. We live in a world that from the beginning, God told us is a mixture of good and evil. It's a product of Eve and Adam taking of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And obviously, in the days of Noah, it reached a pinnacle, and Yehovah decided to cleanse the earth of the evil that so thoroughly thrived on the face of the earth at that time. Turn over to Genesis. In Genesis chapter 6, verses 5 through 8. Genesis 6, 5 through 8 says, "Yehovah saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention and of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And Yehovah regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So Yehovah said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals, and creeping things and birds of the heavens. For I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of Yehovah." So imagine if Noah hadn't found favor in the eyes of God. It's quite possible that mankind would have ceased to exist, because God would have eradicated the wicked and the evil from this planet. But he loves us, and because of Noah's character, he found favor in the eyes of God. And we won't go into it in this study, but it says he was perfect in his generations, which will take us down a whole different discussion. But as we progress toward the end of this era, the end of the age, these end times as they're called, we should look at what Paul said in 2 Timothy 3, 12 through 13. He said, "Indeed, all who desire to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted, while evil people and impostors will go on from bad to worse, deceiving and being deceived." Now, the lies and the deceit are going to escalate. And that's why when you see those talking heads on TV, when their mouths are moving, you can almost guarantee that there are lies coming out of those mouths. And we can't allow ourselves to put our faith in any human being, any man, woman, or child, because the world is full of lies and deceit. We have to be, as you know, the saying goes, keep your head on a swivel, because you got to know what's going on in the world. And as time marches on toward the return of the Messiah, we have to look harder and harder to find anything that's good in the world. It's there, but it's hidden, and it's closely guarded by those who rarely care for or value it, right? They keep the truth from us. They hide it with their lies. Who knows how much some of these people know in terms of the truth? In some of these religious organizations, who knows what kind of truth they really know? But they're intentionally keeping it hidden. Now, we've been given a priceless gift that is right and true, and we can't afford to let it get out of our sight. And Christ, in his prayer to the Father shortly before he was arrested and then subsequently tortured and crucified, stated the following in John 17, 14 through 19. John 17, 14 through 19 says, I have given them your word, and the world has hated them because they are not of the world. Just as I am not of the world, I do not ask that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. They are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, so I have sent them into the world. And for their sake I consecrate myself, that they may also be sanctified in the truth. So God's word, in a world that is permeated with falsehood and lies, that leaven of evil and malice, God's word is a lamp of substance and of worth and of value. And it's the one sure thing that we can hold on to in the world that hated Christ and hates us. Don't ever think that this world loves you. It says you will be hated for my name's sake. So if you're not, perhaps you're not doing the right thing. You know that old saying, no good deed goes unpunished. Look at Psalm 119, 105. It says, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Yah's word is a lamp to our feet. It lights our way. It keeps us from stumbling, and we need to be able to hold on to it as a life preserver in a world that is inspired by a being that would love nothing more than to kill us. Now, he may not be able to, because God may not allow it. Just like with Job, right? He said, well, you can take his health and, torture him a little bit, but you can't kill him. So we don't know what God will allow, but we do know that the world hates us because we love God and keep his ways. And as Jesus said in John 17 that we just read, the world hates us. It may not come out and say it, right? These people won't come out and say that they hate us. And we're not constantly being harassed or persecuted at this point in time. But it truly does hate us. And more accurately, it hates God. And because we love God and will do the things of God, they will look at us as the problem. It mocks us for what we believe. It criticizes us for the things that we do or we don't do, and thinks that we're foolish. It even tries to hurt and kill us in some cases, persecute us, murder us, whatever the case may be. But at certain times, this hatred reaches a fever pitch, like with the Inquisition and things like that, and those persecutions do happen. That's the way of the world. And that's the way hatred goes. And that's its end result. And in Matthew 5, Jesus says that hatred is murder, essentially, right? He who hates his brother has already committed murder. And hatred that is allowed to run its course, its natural course, could very well end up in murder. And that's what this world always ends up doing to the people of God. The people of God, all throughout history, you read in the Bible, the people of God have been persecuted. because they hate us. They hate God and everything that God stands for. And when we tell people they're doing something wrong and that God is going to pay, is going to deal with their behavior, they don't like to hear that. Because they're driven by something greater than themselves. And he also hates us. And that, as you well know, is Satan the devil. So Satan hates us for believing and doing God's word and for escaping his prison of lies. He can't deceive us. And we were once captivated by those lies, and we were held prisoner by him, but we got out, and now he wants us back. He wants to bring us back into the fold. And he hates that God chose us out of this world and opened the gates of that prison that he held us in, which is this veil of lies and deceit, and showed us the way out. And he did it through his word and our believing his word and all the work that he did to free us from that prison. And that's what these days of unleavened bread are all about. That freedom from the bondage of Egypt. And Satan hates us for having eyes that see through the choking smog of deceit that he's thrown in the faces of all the rest of humanity. Through all of the mechanisms that we see in play today in the modern media. He hates us for being able to see, at least dimly, through the lies and propaganda. And as the rest of the world is caught up in hysteria over this thing or that thing, the people of God maintain a steady course. And they're not moved to the right or to the left by what they see coming from Satan's human instruments and mainstream media outlets, because they are grounded in the truth. And he hates that he's got everybody else fooled, but not us. He wants to have complete control. But because of God's great gift, both his grace and the giving of his word, there are some, a remnant, that can't be deceived. He's lost some of those he considered to be his. So now he's angry, and he hates us, and he hates God. And he hates God more than he does us. But he hates us because of the association that we have with God the Father. That we are part of the body of Christ through the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. He hates us for following the Messiah as he followed his Father, and also for following the words that he left for us to understand and practice. And that's why he so diligently tried to corrupt Scripture and corrupt religion, so that people believe a lie, and in the process they end up in a system of false worship where they worship false gods, which is a violation of the first commandment. And he hates the fact that we have hope. He wants us to have no hope, right? We have hope because we believe in the resurrection. Anyone who doesn't believe in the resurrection is without hope. That's what it says in Scripture. And he doesn't want us to think that we're going to have eternal life through Jesus Christ. He wants us to believe that we'll have it through the ways that he's devised. Just like he told Eve, you won't surely die. And it's all lies. Because there is no eternal life except through Jesus Christ. And that eternal life is more appropriately aeonian or age-abiding life. And he hates that we know the truth and we know the way. And the more we're grounded in the truth, the less opportunity he has to deceive us. And notice in John 17, which we read a little bit earlier, Jesus specifically doesn't ask for us to be taken out of the world. He says, I do not pray that you should take them out of the world, but that you should keep them from the evil one. He specifically says, God, I want you to leave them amidst all that fraud, all that deceit, and all that hatred, all those negative waves and vibes that Satan pours out. He left us right in the turmoil to face all those things. The hatred, the fraud, the evil, every single day. All throughout the day, many times in a single day. He wants us to be able to live in it and overcome it, to rise above it. We have to remain here and we have to fight. But why is that? Well, look at Romans 5. Romans 5, verses 3 through 5 says, not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. But what did Christ actually request on our behalf? Right? Now in verse 15, he says, put a hedge around them. Keep them from the evil one. And make sure that Satan cannot touch them directly. That's what he's asking for. And that's a really a wonderful blessing when you think about it. What a wonderful gift that we've been given by our Father in heaven. That we have God and his angels protecting us from the worst that Satan can do. Remember, that was the accusation that Satan had against Job. Yeah, he only follows you because you put a hedge around him. Let me have him for a while and see what happens. And we know how that story went. So we have a protection, and we should be thankful to our Father in heaven for that protection. And we should not have a spirit of fear, but a spirit of boldness, because we do have that protection. When I go out into the supermarket or go out into town and whatever, and this may be a mistake on my part, but there is something inside of me that says, I'm not wearing a mask. I'm not doing all these things because I'm not afraid. You know, and I see several people like that, right? They're walking around, no mask, no nothing, and they're not afraid. Because even though they may not be following God necessarily, they haven't necessarily bought into the hype. Now, in verse 17, he asks specifically that we be sanctified in his word, by the truth. Sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth. Right? And we need to understand that. What does it mean to be sanctified by the truth? He also said, as I mentioned, your word is truth. And sanctify can have many different meanings, right? It could mean to set them apart, put them in a different category, and it certainly does mean that. It could also mean to consecrate or dedicate, like you would dedicate a building or set it apart for a certain purpose. It can even go so far as to consecrate or make holy. So God, or Christ, is asking God his Father in heaven to make us holy through the truth, by the truth. And it can also mean, as I said, to show them to be different. We're to be a peculiar people. To show them to be strange, show them to be odd, show them to be not like the others. And that's what he asks on our behalf. In using the word to sanctify, that sanctification is done through the truth of God, which is his word. God's truth is a tool, the means, the vehicle by which all of these things are done. The very truths of God, which we believe and practice, shout out to the entire world, to anyone who wants to see that we are different. We are not like them. We are set apart. And we are, in their eyes, peculiar or strange. And we could even say that we're alien to them, right? When they look at us, it's very odd what we do, what we practice. It's almost like we're not even human. We are otherworldly, as it were, in truth. And I think otherworldly, we're actually more closely related to the things in heaven, as that's where our citizenship, our communion is in heaven, not on this earth. And it's these same truths that continue to transform us into something other than what we are, and into and closer to the image of Jesus the Christ, who is our high priest and elder brother, and our perfect standard of behavior, because he is a perfect reflection of the Father. He who has seen me has seen the Father. That's what he said. So, we cannot be frauds like the rest of the world. We should not be deceived. We've had our eyes open so that we're, exposed to the truth, and we should be very different from the remainder of the society. Obviously, we look like them, probably dress like them, and we have many of the same physical attributes, but the mind is very different. The way we think is different, because our mind is being renewed and transformed by the Holy Spirit. And the Word of God that we read and study and absorb is changing us. It's already begun, that process of transformation, right? And it's an ongoing process of spiritual maturity. And we are becoming something altogether different, because we know and follow the truth, which are the words that God gave us in Scripture. So on this last day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, I think it's worthwhile for us to remember and appreciate that we've been given the Word of God and all of the things that it contains therein. And it's that unleavened bread of sincerity and truth that we are to be eating during these 7 days. And not just during these 7 days, but more importantly, as we exit the Feast of Unleavened Bread and start to go, back into our normal lives, we need to take the lessons and the things that we've been contemplating as we've gone through this 21 days of sanctification, and remember what our shortcomings are and work diligently to overcome that. So that next year, when we begin the 21 days of sanctification, we don't have to review the same issues. And we go through that same ritual from year to year. And it reminds us that this needs to be going on all the time. It's a constant battle, right? What did Paul say? He said, I beat myself into subjection every day. And as we go through this constant cycle, we will see just how vital it is to our growth and transformation into the image of God. The Word of God is key, and we need to be ingesting it and digesting it daily, often. Turn over into the Old Testament, back in Exodus 13. We're going to read verses 3 through 10. It says, Then Moses said to the people, Remember this day in which you came out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Out of the house of slavery, for by a strong hand Jehovah brought you from this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten. Today in the month of Abib you are going out. And when Jehovah brings you into the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, you shall keep this service in this month. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day there shall be a feast to Jehovah. Unleavened bread shall be eaten for 7 days. No leavened bread shall be seen with you, and no leaven shall be seen with you in all your territory. You shall tell your son on that day, It is because of what Jehovah did for me when I came out of Egypt. And it shall be to you as a sign on your hand and as a memorial between your eyes, that the law of Jehovah may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand Jehovah has brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep his statute at its appointed time from year to year. So what Moses does in that passage is explain the link between God's miraculous work of freeing Israel from their bondage to the Egyptians and this festival of unleavened bread. And the link is between God's work and the festival. And the festival requires us to eat unleavened bread for 7 days. So we see a linkage there between what God did and what we've been doing throughout the feast in eating unleavened bread for 7 days, particularly the eating rather than the putting away of the leaven that we find in our homes, right? So it's not just a commandment to remove the leavening, but it says you shall eat unleavened bread. There's the commandment of eating. And so the emphasis is on the eating of the unleavened bread. In verse 3 and in verses 8 and 9, Moses emphasizes that we observe this day to remember or memorialize or commemorate that God had to do something extraordinary. In our modern lingo, we might say he had to flex his muscles, or he had to exercise his strength. And here Moses used by strength of hand, or with a strong hand. Jehovah has brought us out of Egypt. But he had to do something extraordinary, something outside the course of normal procedure, to redeem us and loose the bonds that held us to that ungodly or anti-God world, of which Egypt is a type. So it was not just some everyday normal thing that God would do. He showed by exercising his strength, by stepping into history, injecting himself into the events of humanity, not just how strong he was, but that he could come into history and separate a people for himself, redeem them from the slavery they were in. But the emphasis seems to be, at least from what I can read here, that this was something rare and remarkable. It wasn't normal. That God was beginning to do something here, and he wanted to do it with some flair or pizzazz to show not only his strength and his position, but that he had total control over the world, over Satan, over everything. He showed that he is the only God, right? He proved to them that he is Yehovah, the ruler, the creator of the universe. And in the process, he showed all of the gods of Egypt to be no gods at all. All of those plagues were to prove that the gods of Egypt were completely powerless. And he made a display of his strength so that it would be very obvious to anyone looking at this, everyone reading about this through all time, that God did something really astounding and stupendous in bringing a whole nation out of slavery in one day. See, God can perform miracles. So he reached into the normal course of this world and disrupted the normal flow of events as they would have naturally gone. They would have just gone on, and the Egyptians would have continued to use the Israelites as they had over all of the previous generations. But he stopped it so that he could pluck them out, or in antitype, pluck us out from the imprisonment by the God of this world. And that's what these days really, truly represent, is us coming out of that enslavement. And what's even more astounding is we, especially, were not even aware that we were enslaved. At least most of us didn't. The Israelites were aware, at least, that they were slaves. But we had no idea what enslavement was, let alone that we were in it. We thought we were free. We live in the freest country in the world, the United States. We can do whatever we want, say whatever we want, be whatever we can be. Yet he called us out of that to an even greater freedom that we didn't even understand. And he redeemed us to be his people. Now, what happened in Egypt, of course, is merely a type of what he did in calling and choosing every one of his people. And we should be able to pull lessons from what he did with the Israelites in Egypt and apply them to our lives, to this day and age. With each one of us, he steps into history and intervenes. He puts his hand into the world and intervenes in our lives to bring us out of the spiritual Egypt in which we're enslaved. He does that through his calling. But normally, he just lets the world events go. He injects where he needs to make sure that his plan is worked out. But like he says over in Ephesians chapter 2, turn there, Ephesians 2 verses 1 through 3. It says, "And you were dead in the trespasses and sins, in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience, among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh, carrying out the desires of the body and the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, like the rest of mankind." Right? So this is how he likens mankind. But he stepped into this history, this flow of events, this course of the world with each one of us. And against all the antagonism, the weapons and fraud and dirty tricks of Satan and his demons and all his human minions that he has running around here and there, He rescues us from the devil's, we'll call it a high security prison, to deliver us free, forgiven, and clear to live a new way of life, a life of true freedom. Freedom from sin, freedom from the bondage, freedom from the penalty that we have brought on ourselves because of our sinful behavior. And most of us were ignorant. We didn't even know we were in prison. And it's actually worse than that, because most of us were unwilling escapees from that world. Most of us had to be dragged kicking and screaming into the truth. You know, everybody's journey is different, but a lot of us have to be slapped upside the head with a 2x4, similar to, like, you know, Paul. Look how Paul, he had to get blinded on the road to Damascus, I think it was, before he could realize what he was doing. We didn't want to be peculiar or strange. We didn't want to be different. We wanted to eat what everybody else was eating. We wanted to do what everybody else did. We wanted to be able to say what everybody else said. And we wanted to be able to celebrate those holidays that everybody else celebrated, because, you know, the family and all of that, they're fun. They, you know, those foods are tasty, or, you know, whatever. Whatever the case may be, we enjoyed our own imprisonment. But God had to pull us out of that prison, like the angel pulled Peter out of the prison. He kicked him and told him, get up and let's go. And had to lead him out by the hand, because we like our imprisonment. We enjoy our bondage. We think it's fun. And of course, Satan has made it seem that way, made it seem that that life of sin is fun. And that's the way it is. But we have to make the best of it. We have to make the most of it. That's the message, right? Make the most out of this life. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die. And you see it bombarding us in the media. But God had to shake us awake and say, no, that's fraud. That's a lie. It's deceit. It's all a scam. And all these things you think you like aren't good. And you know where they end up. They end up in death. There is a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof is destruction. There is no life beyond this supposedly good life that you're living, because it's all sin. Even the good is tainted by evil, because that's the way of this world. That's the way Satan operates. He mixes a little good with a lot of evil. Don't forget that they can appear as angels of light. It all has the taint of Satan's sticky fingers on it, and God has to shake us awake. He has to snap us out of it. It's like the Stockholm Syndrome, right? Where the hostage begins to take the side of their captors. We're all familiar with the story of Patty Hearst, and in the 1970s, who was a victim of Stockholm Syndrome and went around with this terrorist group, robbing banks and doing other things, because she began to love her captors. And we loved the things that our captor told us to do. Those things were fun. We loved all of those motivations, and we loved how it made us feel. And, you know, God had to slap us hard to wake us up and tell us to get with it, get with the program. Wake up. You're with the enemy, and you're going to die if you don't change your ways, if you keep going down that path. So much like Israel, we loved the things we had in Egypt. Look at Numbers. Book of Numbers, chapter 11, verses 4 through 6. It says, now the rabble that was among them had a strong craving. And the people of Israel also wept again and said, oh, that we had meat to eat. Remember the fish we ate in Egypt that cost nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our strength is dried up and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at. Right? All they had was this nasty manna. And that's how we are, right? We loved our captivity. But God did what he had to do to wake us up and drag us out, and eventually we came out. And he went to whatever lengths it took to get us to open our eyes and to begin to understand the truth, because he loves us. Now, seems harsh sometimes, that exit and some of the things we have to go through, because let's face it, many of us lose very valuable relationships, things that are very dear to us. We lose because people can't get along with the fact that we're now different. And so, it can be harsh. And we learned the truth about clean and unclean meats. And then, our boss takes us to a seafood place and we have to take a stand. We have to begin to demonstrate that we're going to make the right decisions. And he does, God will do that when you're coming out of the world in one way or another. Not necessarily, that specific thing, and not everybody has the same challenges. The Sabbath and the working is a big one. But he makes us face the lies of Satan and stand for the truth. You have to be willing to stand for the truth. And then, if you look in Ephesians 2, it really summarizes it pretty well. It says, you were dead in the trespasses and sins. We were dead because we were following the way of life that ends in death. And there is nothing beyond that. We were spiritually dead. Look at verses 2 through 6 of Ephesians 2. Ephesians 2, verses 2 through 6. It says, in which you once walked. So you were dead in the sins and the trespasses and sins in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air. We read this a little bit earlier. The spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience, among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh, carrying out the desires of the body and the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, like the rest of mankind. But God, being rich in mercy, because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved, and raised up with him and seated us with him in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus. So remember, he made us otherworldly. He made us heavenly. We don't live our lives for the flesh now. We live in the spirit. He raised us up above the rest of humanity into something different. But remember, he chose the weak and the base, in case you ever decide you want to get arrogant about it. Something good and spiritual, something that no longer had the taint of this world, but had the shine or the glory of the heavenly. Continuing on in verses 7 and 8, it says, so that in the coming ages he might show the immeasurable riches of his grace in kindness toward us in Christ Jesus. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing, it is the gift of God. So we didn't do any of this. It's all a gift from our Father in heaven. So even the faith that you thought you had was given to you by him. He had to do just about everything. in order to get us to come out of that slavery and open our eyes. And he did that. Continuing on, in verse 9, he says, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. So our Father understands this problem of arrogance and what it does to our character. Kind of like that story of Naaman that we read. Why? He doesn't even come out and greet me, and then he wants me to go dip 7 times in this muddy river when we have these beautiful rivers in Damascus I could be doing? Well, I'll be having none of this. He was offended. So arrogance is something that we can't get caught up in. Humility, an ounce of humility goes a long way. And he knows that arrogance can lead to our fall. And therefore, he didn't want us to be able to boast in our own works, but in his. Continuing on in verse 10, he says, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. So we have to remember that it is the Spirit of God that works in us to do anything good. Of ourselves, we can do nothing good. He called us out of this world to make us and create us into something different. And he gave us works to do. Works that he had prepared. Works that he had designed. So that they would bring us to a place of completion. He then, after he called us and gave us forgiveness and gave us his Spirit, he said, all right, so now go do these works because your creation isn't finished. I'm not done with you yet. You need to be sanctified by my truth. And that's what Jesus asked for. Sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth. So he gave us his word along with the faith to do it and the Spirit to be like him. Right? We have the capability to have communication with him. We can speak directly to our God through Jesus Christ, who is our mediator, who intercedes on our behalf. We have the ability to have a relationship with our Father so that we would have that help, that safety, that protection when we needed it. And in Exodus 12, we'll explore a bit this link between unleavened bread and eating it during the feast. If you turn over to Exodus 12, verses 37 through 39. It says, and the people of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. A mixed multitude also went up with them, and very much livestock, both flocks and herds, and they baked unleavened cakes of dough that they had brought out of Egypt. For it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt and could not wait, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves. So here we have this image, this illustration of the children of Israel being told by Moses and the people he sent around, hey, we're leaving, let's go, we're out. And they assembled in Ramses. So that's what they did. They rallied in Ramses and they left. And they didn't have time to bake bread. We could say that, we eat unleavened bread during the feast because the Israelites had only unleavened bread to eat, having left Egypt in haste. And that's true. But it's a rather simplified explanation. But notice the last phrase in that verse, in verse 39, where it says, nor had they prepared provisions for themselves. It wasn't just the fact that they had only unleavened bread to eat, but they hadn't provided for themselves at all. They were by no means preppers, as we would call it today or talk about today, and people who put things aside for a rainy day or the apocalypse or whatever they do, and for whatever reason they do these things, but they weren't prepared for a breakdown of their society. They weren't prepared for an ejection from Egypt. In their leaving in Egypt, they only had enough time to, well, they plundered Egypt as they were told before they left, but they only had time to slap a few ingredients together and get on the road. But the yeast was left out, so there was no time for the bread to rise. And anciently, you know, they didn't have quick rise yeast. It was a process. You could say that unleavened bread was really the equivalent of an instant breakfast, right? You have to grab something quick and get on the road. But that clause in verse 39 means something else. It means that since they had not provided food for themselves, someone else had to do it. They didn't take a lot of food with them. They may have taken some items, what they could carry and such, but that wouldn't last them long. And the one who had to provide the food for all of Israel was God. Moses didn't have food to give them. Aaron didn't. Joshua didn't. No one had food to give at a certain point. And they had to turn to God, who was happy to provide food for them. Now, we could say that God was the one who caused them to leave in such haste to begin with. So he basically caused that scarcity of food so that unleavened bread was their only option, because he was hustling them out by moving Pharaoh to say, get out. You know, with the death of the firstborn, the Egyptians wanted them to get out quickly because they were afraid they were going to die. And then Israel was afraid that the Egyptians were going to kill them if they didn't get out. So they left in haste, and all they had was this unleavened bread. And a second thing that we notice is that once that short supply of unleavened bread was consumed, they would have to subsist on what he provided. They were going out into a wilderness that didn't have a great deal of food. It's pretty barren out there. And if we're, you know, you're talking a few million people. You know, 600,000 men plus equal number of women and all the children. You have a pretty good number of people and the mixed multitude that went up with them as well. So how do you supply food for that many people? Remember in the New Testament when Jesus had 5,000 mouths to feed, they said, how are we going to find food for this great multitude? Well, the great multitude that came out of Egypt was many times bigger than that. Who's going to provide food for them? Of course, God is going to provide food for them. They would have to subsist on what God himself would provide. And what he provided came on the scene after the 7 days of the feast were over. But it gets mixed in with the idea here of unleavened bread, this manna. So, brethren, we'll stop there for this morning's service, and we will pick it up with this concept of the manna this afternoon. So look forward to that. So anybody following us on Facebook, be sure and join us at 2 p.m. Pacific for the conclusion of this study. So With that, we will close our formal service. And we'll have our final hymn. If you'll please stand and take up your hymnals. Please stand and take up your hymnals and open them up to page 31. We'll sing our final hymn this morning, after which we'll turn the mic over to Eric Aristide to close in prayer. So page 31, let's see, page 31, which is a hymn that comes from Psalm 38, titled, "Let Thy Chastening Be in Measure," right? And that's something we all should be praying for, is that the correction and chastening of God be in mercy and in measure, so that we aren't overwhelmed and consumed. So page 31, "Let Thy Chastening Be in Measure," after which we'll have the closing prayer by Eric Aristide. Okay, if you'll please remain standing for the closing prayer, we'll now turn the mic over to Eric Aristide. Eric, over to you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Good. Almighty God, the only true one, creator of the universe, to you the glory, power, and reign forever and ever. God of goodness, of mercy, and of faithfulness, may your kingdom come and your will always be done on earth as it is in heaven. God of love, have mercy on your humble servants and give us enough power to defeat the adversaries, the devil and his henchmen. Help us, Father, to live an exemplary life and to be each of us a real model for those around us. Do not allow us to be Christian by name, but that our way of life may testify that we are true and legitimate children of God. Bless us, O Father, and help us to remain strongly attached to you, serving you in spirit and in truth, wherever we are, and whatever the circumstances of life. Prepare us, Father, for your kingdom, after which we sigh. Bless the remainder of this day and all the other days of the week. Keep us under your cloak of grace. We pray in the name and by the merits and authority of your beloved Son, our King to come, Jesus the Christ. Amen.